And I kept pretending to be thriving in vacuum cleaner sales world. I couldn't stop. I was too scared to stop. It's hard to stop doing something when you don't have a better dream to put in its place. It's hard to stop doing a thing that other people are encouraging and applauding and rewarding and giving you attaboys for. So I just continued to get really good at something I didn't care about. I mastered somebody else's dream. And here's what I mastered. We would go door to door, and we would knock on the door and tell people that they should let us in because it would prove to be far more than a 2-hour vacuum cleaner demonstration. You would find that this was a complete home care system. And sometimes they let us in, and sometimes they'd slam the door in our faces, and sometimes I would go to the back door and knock on it and say, the jerk at the front slammed the door in my face, but I think you're more reasonable. And sometimes that worked. We did whatever we had to do to get in and browbeat for 2 hours about your filth and about how easily you could address that filth at 36 payments at 21% interest. When I was done, there was no reason except for your complete insanity or total lack of hygiene to not purchase. I could make it look like child abuse to not buy from me. And then I began luring curious and even desperate people into the business by way of vague help wanted ads in the newspaper, promising thousands of dollars a week if you'll just do everything I tell you to do and believe the dream that I don't believe. And I genuinely wanted them to succeed because when they made money, I made money. That's how pyramids work. And I don't know what it is that makes a man climb a ladder that's leaned up against somebody else's wall and recruit others to do the same. Maybe it's money or the promise of more money later. I suspect it had for me a lot to do with how terrifying it is to question the identity that you've put on without thinking. And so that's what I continued to do. Kept banging that drum, kept knocking doors, kept telling people that they were about to achieve all their dreams. But it was after a while, just in appearances, it was starting to rot from the inside out. It was starting to fall apart. I was telling people that this gig was going to take them to the promised land, but I was having sometimes to choose between putting gas in my car and eating. But I kept banging the drum. I kept recruiting people. It really looked convincing. And then the bottom fell out, and it totally fell out. I was evicted from my apartment. I completely stopped paying car insurance. I lost most of my stuff, and I was able to talk a motel owner into letting me stay in a dirty motel room on the premise that I would pay for it next week, maybe the week after. That is to say, I kept a stained roof over my head on the same principle and premise that Wimpy got a hamburger today. And I kept knocking doors, and I kept recruiting people. Me, the guy that dressed pretty well and had a fancy car he hid from the repo man, who was down to about a meal a day, whose credit score was close to double digits, and who was scrounging parking lots for coinage. And then I ran into a guy who had quit just months before. He had been doing this work with me, and I hadn't seen him in a while, and I ran into him in a parking lot, and he had quit for the simple reason that it was clear to him that what we were doing did not resonate with his heart. And so he quit, and he was now doing something else for whatever amount of money it was, but it was true to who he was. You could see the life in his eyes. He was enjoying doing something that resonated with his wiring and who he actually was. And he looked at me with pity, and I felt so much envy, but I had to look at him back with pity too. I envied him so much, and he walked away, and I walked the other way, and in that parking lot I found 4 dimes, and I pretended not to be thrilled. And I picked those dimes up and scurried into the store and bought a can of tuna, and then like a little mouse went back to my dirty motel room and realized I don't have a can opener. So I looked about the room and I took the mattresses off the metal frame and I slammed the can of tuna down on this mattress frame until a dent became a hole that I could get my finger in. And I'm pulling this tuna out of the can, eating it, and just started sobbing. Because I'm willing to be broke, but not for this. I'm willing to struggle, but not for this. And I went into the bathroom and fell down to my knees in front of that dirty toilet and sobbed. And I reached into my pocket and I carried this crucifix. I didn't really know what it meant. My grandmother gave it to me when I moved away as a good luck charm, and I knew enough to tell her, Grandma, I don't think Good Friday was Jesus' lucky day. And I'm not saying that there was a audible voice, but if I had to put words to it as I held this crucifix in my hand, I felt like it was saying, you know, you can start again. You know, you can start over, just go back home and start again. Except for this time, rather than making bold proclamations about what's going to be and what it's got to look like, you could start your journey by asking some questions. You could open yourself up to asking who you are. And then I immediately pushed back with, but I'll look like a failure to everybody I do this with. Keep in mind, I knelt down in front of a motel toilet with tuna fish in my goatee. And I'm worried about looking like a failure because it was so important to succeed at my idea of somebody else's dream that I couldn't even imagine what it might look like to be failing at my own. And so there I was with a crucifix in my hand, knelt down at a makeshift altar, when I admitted to myself, you multiply fear. You're trying to inspire people into managing the anxiety of losing, which is no dream at all. And so, I quit.